and welcome to episode 47 of Let's Talk Bitcoin for October 6th, 2013. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. We're in Atlanta for the cryptocurrency conference. For those of you unable to attend, video conference passes are available now from bitcoinvideopass.com. And of course, both streaming passes and DVD sets are cheaper when you buy with Bitcoin. My name is Adam B. Levine, and today we're spending the whole episode with Rob Banagale. In this wide-ranging interview, I recently sat down with the founder and CEO of Gli.ph at the San Jose Convention Center to discuss Bitcoin, secure messaging, identity, growth strategies, life as a funded startup, the open source question, the password paradox, if biometrics can fix it, and a bunch more. If you'd like to talk to me on Gli.ph, I'm controller, tree, pencil, heart.
It is great to be back on Let's Talk Bitcoin again. I am so happy to be here in front of you, with you two again. It's rad.
Well, let's just go on with that. Rob Banagale, founder and CEO of Gli.ph, which is a secure messaging platform. And the last time we spoke, we were also not too far from where we are now in the city of San Jose, not where either of us usually reside. It seems to be the place where we do these interviews.
Yeah, we're just blocks from here.
Yeah.
It feels like, I guess it wasn't that long ago.
It was about 4 months, I think.
That's a long time in the Bitcoin world.
Well, it's been a long time for you too, certainly. I mean, so let's talk about that for a second. The last time we talked to you, you had just been accepted into Boost VC's Bitcoin program, basically, with your messaging application. And at that point, you know, you were fairly new you had just integrated Bitcoin into your messaging platform. So for people who didn't catch that first interview months back, why don't you just give us a brief overview of what Gli.ph is?
Sure, yeah. It is awesome to be back on the show. Let me begin there. Very happy to be invited back. It's awesome. So thank you very much. The last time I was on was episode 11, in case anyone wants to go back and check the archive, because I know it's there online. And let me just kind of talk about Gli.ph briefly then. Gli.ph is a secure messaging app for iPhone and Android, and you can use the web. But we've integrated Bitcoin payments into it in a pretty clever way, in the sense that it makes sending Bitcoin really easy. So that's kind of what Gli.ph is in a nutshell.
You just completed this, it was a 2-month program, right? 3-month program, a 3-month program with Boost VC, and there was some seed funding involved with that, and you actually have successfully levered up that funding, and now you're into the next round. As we were talking about, you said you get to keep painting.
Right.
When we talk to people a lot of times, more often than not, people are interested in startups more than they're interested in a particular startup that they want to start. A lot of times people are getting into startups because that seems like that's where the opportunity is, just like it was getting into tech 10 years ago, you know? So what is it like participating in one of these accelerator programs where you're basically, I mean, because you moved down from Portland, Oregon. So you moved down and you were in an incubator space working alongside other projects that were in the same program. How did that work? What type of environment is this like?
It's incredible. So Boost VC is a little bit different from a lot of startup accelerators in that they have set up a hotel that you live on a floor. You've got a room and a floor, and that's living situation is taken care of, which is living in the valley is a challenging thing for entrepreneurs especially. And so that's like a big detail that's taken care of right away. So you have this small room. We had these really like executive style bunk beds, if you can imagine that. It's got like really nice bunk beds, but my co-founder and I were literally sleeping on top of each other for the past 3 months in a small hotel room. So that's kind of the startup life, if anybody was wondering how glamorous it is. So we would go down to send 8 stories, go across the street, and there's an incubator space that was actually under construction for a portion of the time we were there, and now it's just beautiful. It's a wide open layout with desks all over the place, and other startups in our class kind of clustered right near us. And we would go in, you work until you are done working for the day, and then you'd go back and zoop back up to your hotel room and get up and do it again the next day.
So entirely focused on just working on the project.
Yes, I mean, it's San Mateo, and I don't know if your listeners have been to San Mateo, but it's a nice small town, but it's almost kind of like somewhat forgotten point between San Francisco and Palo Alto, where like San Francisco, I think, is where people go, oh, that's the tech startup place, and it is. And Palo Alto is like, that's where the money's at. Like that's where Sand Hill Road, if you guys don't know, Sand Hill Road is the big VC road. That's in Palo Alto, Menlo Park. And so San Mateo is this little place in between that, so it's kind of an interesting little spot.
So it sounds like it was a very positive experience for you going through this program.
It really was. I mean, talk about the focus you just mentioned. Because it's not in San Francisco and it's a small place, there's really not much else to do. So we actually found this. I'm going to tell you right now, they found this interesting thing you can do in San Mateo. We're big cat people, my co-founder and I. And actually we're doing something cat related with Bitcoin.
Okay.
That I don't know if I'm going to announce at this time, but your listeners, maybe it'll come up in the future. Yeah. Anyhow, riding our bikes, because you have to get exercise when you're sitting in front of computers all the time. So we'd ride our bikes to the edge of town, and if you head up this bike path, there's a feral cat colony. They've been taken care of by the local cat organizations, and there's like 70 to 80 domestic cats living in the wild. And so we'd be stressed out, and working these long hours. And Nick would be like, hey, do you want to go see the cats? And I'd be like, because we don't have our cats because they're back home, but at our parents' houses, both of our parents are looking at after our respective cats. We'd go and we'd watch the cats kind of walk around. And occasionally someone would come by a feeder because there's these designated feeders and feed the cats. And so that's the thing. That's how glamorous and fun it is to be in San Mateo right now, is you can look at cats.
So work, sleep, and feral cats.
Basically,
it's the formula.
I mean, feral. I think maybe that's not fair to these cats because they seem nice.
Cats.
They're homeless, I guess, and they all have a colony. So I don't know if a colony counts as a cat home. I didn't think I'd be talking about this on
Fair enough.
So hopefully there's some cat lovers on the listening audience.
Again, like I said, I think the startup space is something that a lot of people are very, very interested in, and these incubators are popping up more and more. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, obviously not all incubators are created equally, but I think that the experience is relevant. So over the course of this program, how did the product sort of develop and mature? Did you make any changes that you didn't think you were going to make, or come across any things that really made you reevaluate or take a different direction?
So I guess what I would rewind to, and maybe it'd be good to back up briefly to when we last talked.
Sure.
I think if you listen to episode 11, and I want to encourage everybody to do that, but if you listen to that later in the podcast, or in our talk, you asked kind of what we're going to do next. Right. And I said, well, we've got to do some user experience fixes. Because I went back and listened. I said, we got to do some user experience changes, and then we're going to have to look at doing some other wallets. Because at the time, we'd only done Coinbase at that point. We did it basically exactly what I said we were going to do on that podcast. So if you actually go back and listen and you look at our blog, we started, when I look at the updates in the App Store, we fixed a few things, and then we did wallet after wallet.
When we're talking about the Bitcoin integration that Gli.ph has, just like an instant messaging application, basically.
Right.
Except that you also have these other options that give you things like you can delay delivery of a message until, a day later or hours later or a specific time. You can set it so that a message is going to essentially expire after a certain amount of time and go away, so there's no record of it if it's something that you don't want to be, on the record for a long period of time. And then also there's a send Bitcoin option.
Right.
Where you can basically, through this instant messaging style interface, send Bitcoin in whatever amount is available in your wallet from me to you, yeah.
You're doing a great job explaining my product. I should be doing a better job at this. Gli.ph actually has a very sophisticated text messaging capability. It's a hosted secure messaging tool where when I send a message to you, it goes into the cloud, it's encrypted en route via SSL, it's encrypted at the server, and then it's held between you and I in a public-private key fashion in a secure state there, and then you can access it anytime from any device, whether it be the iPhone, Android, or the web, or anything that supports the web. There's a lot of cool little add-ons to that. Because the system's fairly sophisticated, you can do that thing you mentioned, delay. You can delete messages for real, in the sense that they're not marked as deleted like most services. They're actually removed from the server and the other person's end when they refresh their view. So that's really cool. The Bitcoin part is a really killer aspect of it. You would take a Coinbase account. So if you're on Coinbase, you can attach it, we call it attaching a wallet, to your Gli.ph account. And from then on, anyone else that you're connected to on Gli.ph, so you and I are connected, that's how we coordinated meeting up this morning. I can just say attach coins and then hit send, and it essentially handles all of the details of sending Bitcoin, including figuring out what wallet addresses should be handled or used. All of that is taken care of.
I can't remember anything before Gli.ph that did this sort of aliasing of Bitcoin addresses, where you could send to a name and not have to worry about the key management aspect, not have to worry about generating addresses or anything like that. So now we're starting to see more options like that pop up in other services. And I think that seems like a direction we're going to move in, just because it's annoying to deal with, the incredibly lengthy addresses. And these aliases are actually quite helpful. But I want to take us around to a question about identity.
Sure.
The last time we spoke, we hadn't had this series of revelations about the NSA and basically about how most of the communication methods that we use have been sort of infiltrated. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is prescribed to the fact that these are companies individually that can be pressured and that can have secret laws applied to them and secret interpretations of those laws. Obviously you couldn't even talk about it if I was going to, if it had happened, but right. Is that something that concerns you?
Absolutely. This is an amazing thing that's happened, amazing and not necessarily, not a good way. That's happened since we talked, and these revelations are disturbing, I think, at the most base level. The concern, I think, is basically, and you're talking about entrepreneurship and Bitcoin startups, is starting a company where you want to try to offer communication or privacy to people, and you're based in the United States, that you could be compelled to create a backdoor into your system. And I'm happy to open up and discuss this right here on Let's Talk Bitcoin. This is a real challenge for a service like Glyph, where we've been offering a secure and private system since before the General Petraeus scandal hit, before people were even thinking about private communications as something here in the United States is important. Yes, this is a challenging situation in that we are based in the United States. I was born in the United States. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where John Wade's from. He's from Iowa, but not Des Moines. And to create a company in the United States at this time, it does mean you can be compelled. Now, I can go on the record and say we have not been contacted by any government agency. I think that some executives have been able to say this and be lying or something, but I'm not.
Okay.
For what it's worth, which I think is a lot. And I guess that's what I'd have to say right now, is that just a couple of things. One, we would be subject to the laws of this country at this point. Now, we offer something, protect people and protect their communications, from any party, whether it be a hacker or unauthorized person, or in order to encrypt data, including this lockdown privacy feature, which is under the settings on the web app and the iPhone app. So this is a similar feature to what I think LavaBit offered, which is that your data is encrypted with your password. If you turn this on, you cannot reset your password, but now your data is protected, and no one can decrypt your data.
And this is different because normally when you have something like a password recovery, mm-hmm. that inherently requires that your password be able to be reset by someone who's not you.
Yeah, that's a confusing thing, especially with encryption stuff. So Let's walk through this briefly. You have encrypted data on a service, but you have the ability to reset your password with that service. How are they going to change your password unless they can first decrypt your data? So that means there must be some higher level password. So you've got to be at least somewhat suspicious of you at least have to be somewhat concerned, maybe not suspicious is the right word, that somebody would have access to this higher level key. So we offer this thing. Now, that doesn't necessarily protect against the next question from sophisticated crypto people who unquestionably are listening to this right now, which is, well, what about the fact that your encryption is not open source? So this is a common question. This comes in on the support Glyph, which is how we talk to people who use Glyph regularly, is how come it's not open source, or I don't feel comfortable using this because it's not open source. And I completely empathize with that statement. And I'd say that some of this right now is, at this point, where Glyph is and what we have today, is that you have to trust Rob Banagale and Nick Ash and James Lawton and Joachim Fernstadt, the team members of Glyph, that we've implemented encryption correctly, and we're not doing anything to route information in an unencrypted way. That there is a person trust right now at this level with us. Now, that's obviously not good enough for many people. And so for those folks, the first thing we do is say, look, this is not intended for extremely high security situations. You need to be directly in control of encryption for those things. And so we recommend open source tools like PGP and CryptoCat in its evolved state, where you can personally inspect the code that you're running and see that it's running in real time on a machine that you control.
I actually didn't know that your encryption algorithms weren't open source.
Well, the methods we use are standard encryption libraries.
Okay.
So we are using standard libraries like AES, AES-256 for all the data. So we're not using custom encryption, but the implementation is usually what people are curious about. They want to see the specific areas of code where the encryption is done.
I see. So they actually, so you're talking about why isn't Glyph as a product fully open source?
Yeah. So let me just go further on that. So why isn't it? The reason is, I think this would be some going back into your last podcast. So your last podcast, you were talking about entrepreneurship, idealism versus kind of almost this execution kind of thing. It is really hard to execute as a startup. And I don't think everybody completely sympathizes with this. Like I described the cat getting up in the hotel room scenario. It's like you get up, it's not a glamorous social network pool in the backyard, rags to riches kind of thing. It's like more like a grind, I think, to be good at creating a company than anything else. Before we got into Boost, we were living in my mom's basement. I don't know if I said that on the last podcast.
I don't think you did.
We lived there for a year with those two cats that we had. It was really tough, and at times it wasn't clear we were going to make it. Now, both of us, I've got a pretty solid education at this point. I'm very fortunate that way. I've worked a fair amount of tech. I could be out earning solid dough working in tech. Nick as well, but we've chosen not to do that to work on this company. And I'm getting back to why it's not open source or this portion is not open source yet. In order to move very quickly, in order to evolve a product as quickly as we have, and also have the public accountability of having the system be open to the point where you can please open source folks, like really clear open source folks, it's challenging, I think. I think it's hard at all to move forward. To move forward and also be constantly have your code open for inspection is really tough. Now, does that mean that we can't get there? No, I think that we absolutely must get to where we've decentralized the encryption of content, and we've done it in a way that allows people to control the areas where data is being encrypted as it's flowing through our service. So we've been thinking very, very hard about this problem. We don't have this solution yet, but we acknowledge that this exists for a lot of people, and it will stop some folks from using Glyph until then. What I would say is, often people want to communicate in a secure manner, and they want to communicate to everyone they know in a secure manner. So they'll try to get their friends on a CryptoCat, or they'll try to get their colleagues to use PGP, and if their experience is anything like mine, they'll find those people fall off. It's hard to get people to consistently use these solutions because the user experience is so challenging. And that's where we differentiate. That's where Glyph is different, in that we've taken a high security system and made it extremely accessible, something that anyone can really pick up and start using right away. That is the optimization point, is to take an amazing user experience and a secure and private system and deliver them together at once. And so that's really the thing that we're trying to do and continue to go after.
I think the focus on usability is absolutely right. Your experience with PGP pretty much mirrors mine. I mean, I'm a tech-savvy guy, but I'm also a guy who is inherently lazy as a security,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Paul, Sneak's Law, states that users either cannot or will not securely manage their keys. Is open source a direction that you see Glyph going in the medium to long term? I mean, is that a goal for you with this product?
I would say that the number one thing, I don't think that the entire Glyph system needs to be open source. I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think it'd be valuable as a startup necessarily to try to open source it. Right
well,
away.
Let's talk about that for a second. So I think I agree with you. I think that it's definitely harder to monetize something that's open source because you're essentially inviting in competition. You're saying, okay, we've done several years of work, here it all is, compete with us.
Yeah, especially at the iOS level. The iOS is extremely hard to do a great job at. And you've seen it because there hasn't been a lot of competition yet entering the App Store to send and receive Bitcoin. To deliver, say, our conversation view, which is like, I don't know, tens of thousands of lines of code. To do just show a message, show if it's sent yet, show the progress as a picture message is sending. Like, these are actually very hard challenges that we spent, a year and a half of just that portion of the app working on. To give that out would be, it would...
Right now, it would be a disservice to your investors.
It would be your investors. In the talk last podcast, so there's this idea of people coming in trying to move quickly to deliver something that has a return to get in and out. I think that one of your co-hosts mentioned like a 2 to 3 years and out versus a 25-year kind of vision. And I wanted to, right now, make it clear that we're not a 2 to 3 year kind of in and out entrepreneurship endeavor here. With Glyph, our goal really is beyond just, say, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's really exciting and important to what we're doing, but we are more focused on this concept of identity. And I think I talked about that in episode 11.
We're here at the C2SV Convergence Conference. Pretty much all of the talks yesterday, with the exception of the Bitcoin panel that I participated in, was really, really focused on identity and on being able to take small chunks, incredible amounts of small chunks of personalized data that is recovered through all these myriad of services that we're now using, and about the sensors that are in everything and how they're, over the next 18 months, going to become incredibly pervasive. All of that data is basically worthless if you can't tie it to someone who you can then try to use it to sell things to. So this question of identity on the internet, I really think is going to get to be incredibly important. So Bitcoin is sort of different than a lot of the technologies because it doesn't require that inherent connection between your real life 100% birth certificate identity and the way that you talk on the internet. So, I mean, Glyph also has kind of, we've talked about it before, as granular control of your identity and what you release from that. Why is that a direction that you chose to take, and why is identity important to you in a world that seems increasingly about finding ways to not charge your customers instead to market their data?
Well, I think first is I would get as far away from just like a customer or selling something to someone as the only use of identity. I would get away from that. I would say identity is more about you and me and your team or people that I don't know on the street. What we have, I think this is a really cool thing. So when you're walking down the street and you see somebody standing on the street corner and you're like, who is that guy? There's this kind of like stranger danger that is almost in the United States, I think. We even have signs that have like this neighborhood watch guy, you know what I'm talking about, with the black silhouette, and he's got this sneaky look to the side. There's this kind of inherent fear that is, I feel like, put into society of people you don't know. And increasingly, we're finding, thanks to the internet in part, that there are a lot of people out there who are very much like us, who think a lot of the same kind of ideas. They care about things like obscure payment technologies, and they unite and they find a community as a result. But in the real world, as you walk around the streets and there are people around you, there's no way to assess that those people are potentially of great value, not for selling something to, but maybe just to get to know, to learn from. Maybe they can loan you a lawnmower, like if you need a lawnmower. I believe that identity and digital identity will become flexible to allow you to interact with people in ways that we just don't have. There's a bridge between the offline world and the online world. And it's the spark that allows a conversation to occur. Something that separates that might be something so simple as being able to see that this person has a reputation of some type or has some level of trust of some type. And you may not see a lot more other than there's a blip that there's somebody over here who's of significance of some type. And this layer, a digital layer over the people who are nearby and around, would allow you to interact with them in innumerate ways. Some of those interactions may involve a payment at the end of it, or down the line after you've gotten to know them, and that payment would be handled via Bitcoin.
I definitely buy what you're saying, and I think that proves true with me. You know, it's very, very difficult to meet people in real life. It's much easier when you can interact on an intellectual level before you interact on a personal level, before you interact at a physical level. So how does Glyph solve that?
Well, it doesn't.
Okay.
So right now it does not. But I believe in, that's why I say that we're not in this for a short term.
Right.
I believe that this is a long-term problem, but that it can be solved incrementally. We can work toward it. I believe that we have the framework to do that. I think it's really important to begin with allowing anonymity as a level of privacy, which is what we do, and taking that all the way through completely verified identity, where I don't want to reveal, and I would cause, there's some great examples of this already working. So if you look at Airbnb, when you look at a house or a home or apartment, the person has their phone number verified and they have their address verified, and they don't show the person's phone number. They just show that the service has validated that information. It's hard to tell, but I think that impacts the user, or impacts a person, to see that there's some level of trust. This person has some level of reasonable reputation of some sort. So not that having a phone number is that much reputation, but we are still looking for anything that in our current context, that the life that we've lived as Americans through the 90s, 2000s, and to now, if you have a phone number that's verified, you must have some reasonable level of trust. If you have a home address, you have some level of trust. Now, I don't think those are the complete encapsulation of how reputation should be built in any way, just as obviously a credit check should not be an encapsulation of your reputation or trust. But I do believe that there'll be more and more ways to assemble reputation that can be used to meet and interact with people as a result, more people will interact and more cool things will happen. And Bitcoin will power the payment portion of those things. It's a trip, huh?
Yes, and then you take that and you combine it with the Google Glass, augmented reality. And
right. Well, I think it's key to like make sure that this isn't something that has to be on all the time. This is going to be something that you can selectively reveal.
One of the reasons why we don't, I think, as a culture, trust people who we've just met on the street, for example, is because we don't know if they're good or bad. But what that means by effectively identifying the good people is that you also have identified the bad people. And so it creates this sort of, if it's easy visually to tell who's good and who's bad, it creates this like disenfranchised bad people group.
This is something that my co-founder, Nick, is very concerned about. He plays this side of the shoulder in this discussion. He says, would a system that offers reputation, for example, disenfranchise some people? Is it a participatory system? That is a compelling and large question. And I don't have the answer to that yet. But I do think that right now, the state of things is that that is what you have, the credit score. So we just decided to lease a house. So this is kind of news, I think, to share here, is we're going to stay in San Mateo. We're relocating from Portland, Oregon. So we'll stay near the cats. Our real cats are actually going to come here. So we won't need to go to the feral cat colony to see cats anymore. But to get our house, I had to check my credit score again. I hadn't done that in a little while. I was kind of scared about it, and I was like, oh, I kind of breathed a sigh of relief when I finally saw it because I knew it was going to be at least enough to get probably the rental, and it was. But thank goodness that I had been like doing credit type stuff in my life, because if I hadn't, I guess I wouldn't be able to get a home to rent. So right now, the system is already very much set in participation in a way that's directly linked to fiat currency, to the existing banking system, to the use of credit cards. I think we can do much better than that. But the question that you raised is a serious one, and it has to be thought of, if we're going to do something better, how can we do something that's inclusive and allows people who want to establish a reputation to do so? The funny thing is I shouldn't even be talking about this. I should be drilling on what we've done this summer, where Glyph is at. But this is way more fun, and I really wanted to, because your last show was about people who are in it for short term, or people who are trying to do something to change the world, is the language I think was used. And I think that's used pretty liberally. But honestly, I think that there's major opportunity between combining entrepreneurship around technology and Bitcoin to do something big. And this is a big thing.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Tucker, Bitcoin enthusiast and host of the upcoming Cryptocurrency Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, October 5th. We've got a marvelously libertarian-infused day of discussion about what is indisputably the future of money, and you are invited. For those of you who can't attend, we've partnered with Let's Talk Bitcoin to offer video conference passes available for government currency and, of course, Bitcoin. For more information, bitcoinvideopass.com.
If I showed you a website where you could easily purchase electronics from the world's largest distributor with Bitcoins at 0% markup, would you think it was too good to be true? Good news, it's real, and it's at bitcoinstore.com. Choose from 500,000 items, save money over Amazon and Newegg, and convert your Bitcoins to real-world items. You can even buy with privacy. All they need is a shipping address. But don't take my word for it. See for yourself at bitcoinstore.com.
Let's change gears here and circle back around.
Let's circle back. Wait, before we change gears.
Yeah.
So last time I was on, I brought a little thing, something for you.
A fun meter.
Fun meter,
Yes.
That's right. So I've got something different this time, because I said to Nick last night, what can we bring? And I was going to bring this weird 3D printed piece of plastic, and I was like, that's not Bitcoin related. So we've got something, actually, it's from Bitcoin 2013, but we still have it left. And so I thought I would bring this. I have a Bitcoin
sweet
embroidered
hoodie.
Now it's a medium. I think I was going to email Crystal and ask her if that was the right fit for you.
I'm sure it'll be great.
So I have a.
Thank you very much.
You're
Rob.
welcome. Please keep.
You're the only person I interview who routinely brings me gifts.
Oh, well, at least I know I can come back if I keep doing that. I really appreciate the show. It's awesome. So
thank you very much. Sure, it's very flattering that you listen, and you clearly do listen.
Yeah, it's awesome. So keep it up.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So Yes. So the shifting gears.
Shifting gears.
Okay.
So the last time you were on episode 11, as you've reminded us, one of the other areas that I think we kind of left where there wasn't really an answer and I wanted to check in with you about it was, first off, the password problem, and second off, the sort of difficulty that people have had with the actual glyphs as usernames. And so let's talk about passwords first, because because with the new iPhone that's come out, it looks like fingerprint technology, fingerprint with big air quotes technology, is being integrated into pervasive mobile devices. So, it took, I think, 4 or 5 days before this system had been broken using low-tech, off-the-shelf means.
Right.
Do you think that these biometric solutions have a future? Do you think that there's a solution here to the password problem that we hadn't yet talked about?
Boy, I'm not an expert in biometric technology. That caught me by surprise, as probably a lot of people it did. I think that when it comes down to a lot of security is about deterrence. It's about trying to do a best attempt at keeping people from doing the wrong thing. Endpoint security, so the point where the user is accessing the device and making sure that no one had a telescope lens and was capturing your PIN before and then got your phone and then got on your phone and used it to access your information is a challenging thing to keep control of. The fingerprint thing, I think, is still another step at that. You could get the high resolution fingerprint and use the means that they show off in that hack to do it, but it still is not an easy thing. If I want to get your fingerprints, how am I going to do that? How am I going to get your fingerprints, Adam?
Well,
off that hoodie.
There are ways. There are ways.
I guess I could.
Anything you touch, you leave fingerprints.
Yeah, I could, but I would have to be very determined.
It's work.
I would be
totally
very determined to do that. And if you wanted mine, I would be impressed if you could get them. Even off this, I'm going to leave some for you right here. So if you want to try and I don't have the 5S, so you're going to be even more.
That's okay. I don't either. But the problem with passwords is that the easier they are to remember and use as passwords, the worse they are as passwords.
Right.
So I guess that's my interest in the biometrics. I don't really care about the specific technology.
Right.
But is that a solution, or is it really just about passwords?
I don't know. I do know, my solution to passwords is I use 1Password. When I want to use a service.
And by 1Password, you mean a service called 1Password, not a single
I don't
password.
use 1Password. I use a lot of I use unique passwords of extreme length with varying letters and numbers, so good luck. I shouldn't even challenge people to do that. So please, actually, let's not do that. By 1Password, I do mean using the product 1Password, which is a password management tool. And it's hard to even use that. I use the app to get my passwords occasionally. It's high security to get at the password. It's a huge pain. I don't think password thing has been solved yet, even with fingerprints, because when it comes down to it, you can only use that to unlock a phone. You can use it to buy stuff on the App Store. They've hinted at the idea that it might sometime be used elsewhere, but they're going to work on it.
Oh, I didn't realize that it wasn't available as an accessible API.
Oh, no.
Oh, interesting.
It's not accessible to app developers. If it was, I think that it would definitely be worth considering. I think that people would demand it. And again, this goes down to the crux of security and where we're at. Security is only as good as you can get people to use that security. Right. And if people won't use it, I think Melissa Mayer got up on stage at the TechCrunch 4 weeks ago and said she doesn't have a PIN on her phone because it takes too much time.
Because Mike was making fun of me because I don't have a passcode on my phone.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike was like, are you crazy? And I was like, look, I just can't do this passcode thing 15 times a day. And then when I saw the fingerprint thing, I was like, and now I don't have to.
That's kind of, as executive of a Fortune company, is not even using a PIN on their phone with just getting and can send email that could change the market. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I think that fingerprints, so much as they are not easily broken, absolutely can be better if it means more people use locking.
Right.
And so that's, it gets back to where I think the argument for what the product we've built so far is that, it doesn't pass the extreme secure checks of open source and the peer review around that. But what it does do is do a heck of a lot more than what GroupMe, WhatsApp, or systems that are storing your data in plain text are doing. And you can actually get people to use Glyph.
Right. Yeah, and that's been an interesting experience for me, too, because since I added my Glyph to my email signature, I probably have about 50 people who I talk with periodically on Glyph, and some of them use it a lot more than others do.
Right.
So, but that really was a problem that we talked about early on, was that onboarding experience and getting people to sign up and use it Did you do any work on that over this period?
So we did. So let's talk about there's two things. There's onboarding and then the glyphs themselves. And I've got like a whole rant about the glyphs thing.
Okay.
So the onboarding experience, we did make some changes to. When I say onboarding, that's a kind of a startup-y type term.
Yeah.
And it generally means how do you get somebody who's never heard of your system to actually be using it and continue to use it so they're retained. So this word retention.
Right. And because just signing up for it isn't actually that helpful.
It's not that helpful. Yeah, it's like saying we've got a bunch of users, and it's more important that people love your service, and you know they love your service because they're using it. And Tim Cook, there's an interview with Tim Cook that was published yesterday where he actually talks about that. I think the Bloomberg published, so it's worth checking that out if you haven't read the Tim Cook interview with Bloomberg. But the idea is that when you're onboarding people to Glyph, it should be easy to get started. Previously, we had this thing where on iPhone and the web and on Android, you had to choose your glyph first. And I don't think we've said it in this podcast, but a glyph username is made up of symbols instead of letters and numbers. So instead of being Firebird54, you're bird, lightning, dice, or something like that. There's 20 of these symbols you can choose from. For some people, this is a totally wacky, off-putting experience to have to choose symbols for your username. We get this feedback occasionally.
And they have to be unique.
So that means if somebody hasn't taken it yet, because it is unique. My glyph is my own, and no one else can take it at this point. That is tough. It's tough to say, so let's get into this part. So I'm just going to roll off onboarding into the glyph thing now. So the glyph system is very novel. Some people will love it. They think it's so cool to pick out their glyph and tell people what their glyph is. They can personalize their identity, like in the sense of more of expressing who they are through the choice of the symbols they choose. Other people, it's just hard to say it. Like my glyph, and if anybody wants to send me a connection request on Let's Talk Bitcoin, my glyph is Dice Heart Lightning. So to write that out, I literally write it in text, or I have to get this ping and put it in the body of email. If I'm sitting across from somebody like you guys right now, I'd be like, hey, here it is, and you have to peck it into the keyboard.
Right.
It's too hard. It is too hard to do. So we are working very hard to make this improved from a variety of different ways. One is how people, when you express who you are, you have a link. So you don't just have the glyph in your bottom of your email address, but a link that goes to a page that is like one click, connect with me. And the connection's not this 3-time back and forth. It's just boom. And it's easier to get rid of one that's unwanted.
Right.
So that is one thing we're doing. The other thing is in person. So there's some really cool stuff that's happening right now. Actually, I feel like it's a little early to say what it is, but I can say that we are trying to solve the in-person problem of exchanging and connecting on Glyph in a way that doesn't require this kind of, let me look up, remember, look up. Thing. Yeah, it's a very manual process. So at the very least, I can say we are very, very acutely aware that the Glyph thing, for some people, they don't like it. And for some people, they just don't want to have to remember or type it. And we're solving those problems.
I think from my experience, a lot of it is just that I'm not used to it. Mm-hmm. Over the last, because I guess I've been using Glyph for about 4 or 5 months now. More often than not, when somebody sends me a Glyph invitation, and I know who the person is, or I get to know the person, then over a pretty reasonably short amount of time, I'm like, oh, that's a cool Glyph, because I can connect to a certain extent how that person sees themselves. And it's very strange because it was very much not that way when I started using the system.
Right.
And I didn't remember what my glyph was, and now I kind of remember what my glyph is most of the time.
Right.
But yeah, it is counterintuitive. And so, once you get past that learning curve, then it really gets a lot easier.
Some of it is just this is new and...
Well, it's like a new alphabet.
Yeah, it's like a new alphabet. I like to try to think of the strangeness of Glyph when you first pick it up as similar what it's like to experience Twitter for the first time. If you've never tried Twitter and you're trying to figure out what it's about and why it's valuable, it takes weeks, I think, to build up people you follow, to build a habit of checking it, to realize you can reply and join a conversation, to be able to see when someone has replied to you and how you should behave. If you think about Twitter, it's a pretty complicated tool. But once you kind of get your hands positioned on this machine to where you can get the dials turned right at the right times, it's amazing, phenomenal network. I think that what we've done already has a few of those dials. Some of them can probably be moved closer together. There's some things that we can do to make it a better system still. And especially, this is the big thing with going back to the startup kind of thing, when you're building a company and you're building a product rather, you see cooler things you can do, like We know there's requests to do really awesome stuff, like, for example, group messaging. This is one of the most requested things.
Just going to ask about that.
Yeah, this is like the most requested thing that's been asked for the longest time. The trick with integrating group messaging is making sure that it, like, in of itself can be done in a way that respects privacy, that respects the security that we've already built into the system, and those are implemented properly, that the user experience for those things is done correctly, how it affects the rest of the application. These are actually really hard things to get right. So you kind of have to take two different views on it. You can go the Facebook route, and not like the Facebook route from how they treat privacy or anything, but like they have a motto which is break stuff, I think. Move fast, break stuff. I don't think I've got that right, but they base hack, I think.
Paraphrasing.
Hack. If you work at Facebook, it's okay to write something and have it break something major. And if you use Facebook regularly, you know that things break fairly regularly, and that's because they are moving as quickly as possible. So one way to do group messaging would be like, we're just going to hack this thing in and just see what happens. The other thing would be to go focus on more of an Apple type thing, where you only release something after you've inspected the very details of it, and you have it as close to perfect, if not perfect in the eyes of the creator of that product, as you can. And when you have enough money, for example, and enough traction, because you're like the largest tech company in the world, you can generally afford to tell the entire market to wait. We will do this when we're good and ready, and we can do it in a way that leapfrogs everyone else. And we're going to astound you with it. If you're more of a scrappier type startup, you take more of an approach of, we're just going to hack this on. The problem with doing that hacky type thing is you risk leaving rough edges on some of the other cool parts. So like the wallet integrations, for example, that we've done so far, there are some little bit of rough edges on some of the different services. For example, if you use two-factor SMS on Coinbase, it doesn't work with Glyph. But if you use two-factor Google Authenticator or Authy, which are the other options on Coinbase, they work just fine. But we don't even say in the app right now that the SMS doesn't work. And that's very confusing to some people. What we could do is go back and try to write language or change the experience so we can warn the user, this particular thing doesn't work with our system. Every time you go back and focus on fixing something like that, you're not working on group messaging.
Right.
You're not pushing the product ahead. You're not, and as a small team, I named the 4 people who work on Glyph right now. They can't do everything at once. And for example, manage an open source system as well, so that you're handling all.
So what's the priority? I mean, is the priority right now, the next 3 months, what's the priority?
Well, next 3 months, first thing is getting relocated, getting our cats down here, getting happy in San Mateo.
Well, so you just got your next round of funding. Yeah. So how long is that going to take you through?
So we're in the middle of a round. With most of these rounds, the way it works is, and this is more of kind of how it's described in like Paul Graham's type stuff, is that you start with an accelerator, which is usually a couple tens of thousands of dollars. You graduate to type 2 startup, I think is what he calls it. At that point, you raise, generally there's an angel type round, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range, which is kind of where we're at. And then if you do well and you grow, then you get to graduate to a Series A or a Series Seed. And those rounds are usually in the $2 to $5 million range. And so we're kind of in the angel type area right now. Mm-hmm. What usually you focus on at this point is on growth, being able to prove the concept that you've done, to make it more clear that there's a revenue opportunity, there's a way to monetize this thing that you've built, and then you kind of graduate to, okay, now you can really blast this thing out with that A. So we're focused on growth, making it easier to get onto Glyph, making it easier to get started connecting with people, making the connections easier to resolve, building networks in Glyph. Right now, you and I are connected. It's a one-to-one relationship. If you didn't have 50 people, which amazes me that you have 50 people on Glyph, that's awesome. If somebody doesn't send you a message, you have no reason to use Glyph today. Or you need to send Bitcoin to somebody. You have no reason to use Glyph today. We need to have situations where you have networks built. Group messaging is a wonderful example of that. I know this is weird. I feel like I've brought up cats about 100 times in this podcast, but I like to send cat photos with some of my friends. I have a group of people who like to do that. Cat gifts especially, they're funny. And so it's a way to break up the day. And if I had a group of people who did that, like I would be checking the app more often than I do right now.
Well, to a certain extent, it turns it into a little mini social network.
In some sense, it kind of does. And it's could be a super private, secure way to communicate and share things that are not just text messaging. So the next couple of months, our roadmap ahead is focused on really making something that is easier to build networks around and build growth around.
So we are almost out of time here. How are you actually going to monetize this? And is that something that you've even approached yet? Because it's a free product. I know that there was a value add where you had email addresses that were essentially anonymous email addresses people could use through the service.
Right.
And you got one of those or two of those for free, and then you could buy more at a nominal fee, but they were pretty inexpensive.
Right.
So, so is monetization something you're even looking at yet, or is it mostly just focused on the growth side?
It is absolutely should be something that any business should be focused on. How is it going to make money? Most companies don't get to do like what Instagram did, which is we're never going to come up with anything. We're just going to build something massive. In the Valley, there is something to be said for building pure growth for growth's sake. But that's not really I don't think that's a good way to build a business.
Well, it's especially hard when you don't have that identity data and you're not able to, generate those streams.
Right. I don't think that you have to necessarily monetize personal data in order to make money. And I think that's probably the wrong way to be thinking about things. And that's certainly not the way that we're thinking about doing this. We don't believe in selling people's personal data. So that's off. That's already off the shelf. What's the right language here?
It's off.
We're not doing it. Okay?
Out of the question.
Out of the question. Thank you. Here's some quick ideas. One is there's a lot of features people ask for that are pro-level things. So, for example, people want essentially what's already offered in some other services, which is I want my messages to be continuously deleted after they're read. It's not everybody cares to do that. In fact, most people don't delete messages. Some people delete them religiously. So we believe that between that, video messaging, some other really cool little pro features, and also just basically supporting Glyph. It's a free thing right now. I put 2 full years, more than 2 years of my whole life into this thing so far. We've never charged except for the small optional email thing. It would be amazing to have people say, gosh, we like what you're doing. We like what you've done with Bitcoin. I'd like to support you by subscribing. So we'd like to offer them some additional pro features and also just ask people to support what we're doing by giving money to us.
Yeah, so a freemium model.
A freemium model, so that we believe there's opportunity there. We also see opportunity in Bitcoin specifically. So I'm going to talk about 2 different things here. One's pretty sophisticated, one is maybe obvious. So Glyph is now integrated with Coinbase, BIPs, and blockchain. You can, on Coinbase and blockchain, these wallets, they offer ways to exchange fiat currency for Bitcoin. So they're like retail exchange on Coinbase, for example. It's really easy. ACH in, Bitcoin out. One of the easiest in the United States, at least. Since we talked, we created this thing called instant wallet creation. And what this thing did was allow anybody who's new to Glyph to create a wallet just with a few taps. What we've done is basically we're creating wallets. 60% of new users to Glyph are creating their Bitcoin accounts. And we believe that a large number of those are people who are new to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So we're not only introducing people to Bitcoin, we're saying, here's how easy Bitcoin can be. So we're teaching them kind of this new way of using Bitcoin. When we create a wallet on Coinbase or create a wallet on BIPs, that's an opportunity for those wallet providers to get those people to buy Bitcoin. And when they do that, they take fees. And so there's an opportunity here where we're actually creating customers for these services. And already, for example, if you refer somebody to Coinbase, you get paid out and they convert money into Bitcoin. You get paid out a small thank you for the referral. There's opportunity for Glyph as it creates wallets on big wallet providers that serve as exchanges to receive compensation for the referral. I got a different monetization, though, that's kind of out there. This is for your advanced listeners. Since we talked, I had mentioned that we started with Coinbase, then we went to BIPs, and then blockchain. Now, what this means is that if, Adam, you're on BIPs, which is the big wallet provider in Europe, and I'm on Coinbase, and we're connected on Glyph, and I want to send you half a Bitcoin, I send it to you, and it's just taken care of. Now, let's say I want to send you $50 worth of Bitcoin. So I don't know what that is today, but a very small amount. Something that would be subject to a network fee, a microtransaction in Bitcoin. And we're going cross-wallet. I should say, the bigger wallets are now offering free instant microtransactions within their wallets.
Right.
Because they're doing it off-chain. Now, if I want to send it across wallet, it's not free, right? So we're going to get dinged on that. Now, the cool thing about what we've built so far is that since Glyph integrates through the APIs of these two different services, you want to send me $50 worth of Bitcoin. So let's say 0.005 Bitcoin. You send it to me on Glyph. What we can do is instead send that to a Glyph-controlled account on that service. So it's still within the free microtransaction level because it's in that wallet. And then on the other service, on Coinbase, a Glyph account will then send to the recipient that 0.005, again, within the wallet. So it's free of that network transaction fee.
So what's happening is, or what could happen in this scenario, is that you've got two off-chain services. So Glyph maintains accounts on both sides and essentially does arbitrage between the two. So they're both instant transactions and fee-free transactions, and then you guys will collect a small portion of what there would be?
Theoretically, we can eliminate inter-wallet network fees by doing this. That's crazy. Like no one, I believe, is being able to do this. It's because we're uniquely positioned as a third party to these wallets that we can do something like this. And then what we'd have to do, obviously, is set up the book so we later would move Bitcoin. But we can do that.
Reckon it.
But
it can be done at a much higher level.
Yeah, that doesn't subject to network fees. So on volume, we can do some really cool things cross-wallet. Now, I don't think anybody's really even considering things like this.
We really are out of time, but that is a very interesting approach to it. I really look forward to seeing how you continue to sort of develop these models because it's hard to monetize things that are free.
It is very hard. And I just ask the listeners, keep an eye on what we're doing. If you don't feel it's at the place that it needs to be yet, I agree with you. We got a lot of cool work to do yet, but it's encouraging. There's a lot of encouragement coming out of the Bitcoin community, and I love to get feedback. I run the support Glyph, so if you're trying Glyph for the first time today, send me a message, say hello, say you heard about it on Let's Talk Bitcoin. I will reply to you. Sometimes it takes me a few hours. Thank you guys for having me on again. I hope that I come back again. I like Let's Talk Bitcoin. It's really cool.
I'm sure that you will, Rob. Thanks again for being on the show.
You're welcome.
And keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to episode 47 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. The content for today's show is provided by Rob Banagale with on-location engineering by Crystal Levine. Music was provided by Jared Rubens and Jazztown. If you can't get enough original thought and discussion, read our daily blog at letstalkbitcoin.com. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at theweeklybitcoin.com. To get in touch, send me mail at adam@letstalkbitcoin.com or visit letstalkbitcoin.com/talk to be directed to our listener subreddit. See you next time.